all stemmed from small districts. This is the only one that is not part of our Constitution, and our Constitution fails because it's not there. It fails because it's not there. Expand the House of Representatives. Make democracy immediate again. Hi, I'm Embellicos. Normally I do content for TikTok, but given the realities of the platform, I need to branch out. Normally I do content involving the Supreme Court. I like to take arguments, make them better, talk about a wide variety of subjects, and maybe provide a little bit of a different way to think about it. And when I present a problem, I like to offer what I think are solutions to that problem. And so in that vein, I want to talk about this encroaching oligarchy that we face. I shouldn't have to say it, but when a billionaire uses their own bespoke media, whether it's legacy media or social media or new media that they bought to provide their narrative or counter-narrative, and they can put the kibosh on negotiations done by your own representatives, where they have the inside line to your representatives over you, when our congressmen insider trade, when they front run the market, and it's so acceptable that not only hedge funds do it and banks do it, but your representatives do it, that they think they need this money because it's so expensive to serve in that role. When districts are 750,000 people, they need the name recognition and the face recognition. They need enough money to put their narrative out to their constituents, or else a billionaire will get to their constituents first. We're in a situation where your retirement accounts are locked up in the stock market, so to the financial performance of the top 100 or 400 companies in the United States, they might be vertically or horizontally integrated monopolies, but we cannot break up those monopolies because it messes with your own financial security. We're in a situation where billionaires, by their own admission, a group of tech entrepreneurs, by their own admission, are spending half of their time, and they have families in and around Mar-a-Lago, the literal house of the next president of the United States, and make up the vast majority of the people chosen for the new cabinet. Where our representatives are so afraid of causing the flight of capital out of the country to some tax haven that we cannot do the simple things of increasing marginal tax rates to balance the revenue side of our federal budget, the basic task of government. We have a problem. And fortunately, there is a solution, and it doesn't require a constitutional amendment. It doesn't require a constitutional convention. It's a simple law. Repeal Section 22 of the 1929 Permanent Apportionment Act. Now, this 1929 law was not originally designed to be nefarious or to remove our ability to fight oligarchs. It was meant to reform the census process, because before computers and with a rising American population, the census was incredibly expensive and fraught. And they were having fights in the House of Representatives about it, not only for adding new representatives, but coalitions were shifting and falling in prominence based on this number. So from 1911 to 1929, they did not add a single representative, and it was taking a large amount of their time. So finally in 1929, they decided to try to resolve the problem, reforming the census process. They added more criminal penalties for people who try to pause it or stall it. They made it have to happen within a certain amount of time. But they added at the end a section that hurts us now. And that is, they capped the size of the House of Representatives to a number that we had in 1911, 435 representatives. Maybe because they were running up against size constraints at the time, they had no air conditioning or much structural steel or covered stadiums. They decided that 435 was enough, and they stopped it there. And now we have districts of 750,000 people, when originally we were designed to be a representative republic, with the building blocks of democracy being 30,000 people. And I would argue, I'm going to make this argument, that's where we start to fail. Our democracy has gotten worse and worse because our districts are getting bigger and bigger. And instead of knowing your representative, or your spouse knowing their spouse, or your kids knowing their kids, or your coworkers having worked with them can vouch for them, instead, we need a billionaire to tell us what we want to know about our representative. It not only makes them beholden to the billionaire over you, but it makes them swift votable. They can lie about your representative and you will fall for it. And this is a problem. Now, I'm going to make this argument in two ways. One is towards a kind of originalist Republican and another towards a Democrat. For Democrats, you won't need much convincing, but please stick around for both arguments because I think they're very interesting. So for the originalist Republican, the framers wanted our districts to be small. We know this from contemporaneous notes at the Constitutional Convention. 1787, Monday, September 17th, there's an interesting debate. Ben Franklin stands up with a proposition. He says, to start off, I don't agree with this entire Constitution. And you guys know that. But it's pretty good and it works together, and I'm not so dogmatic to believe that I can never be wrong. I want to introduce a unanimous consent agreement so that if we have an issue with a certain part of the Constitution, a certain small part, that is not elevated to the point where it motivates our partisans who hang on our every word to doom the whole project. Because other countries are looking at us, they're watching us, they're licking their chops for us to fail. We need buy-in. So we need a unanimous consent agreement. But again, I don't agree with this entire thing. At which point, Nathaniel Gorham, another founding father, stands up and he brings up a very interesting topic, one that seems unrelated, but it is not. He directly brings up what Ben Franklin was concerned about. He says, if it is not too late, I want to, instead of a proportion of one representative for every 40,000 people, as we have written, it should be one representative for every 30,000 people. And he sits back down. And at this point, George Washington himself, for the first time, the only time, he stood up. He said, I've kept quiet until now. Maybe it's best that I stay quiet, but this means a lot to me. You guys have talked a lot about these issues. And one of the things that seems important to me is the smallness of proportions of these districts, these House districts, these basic building blocks of democracy. If these building blocks are 40,000 people, it does not do enough to protect the rights and interests of the people. It should be one for every 30,000. Now you might say, oh, that's rich. This guy pretending that he's a fan of building blocks of democracy when he had enslaved people, he had women who could not vote, he had children, obviously, who cannot vote, he had people without property who could not vote. This guy talking about democracy. But democracy has two ingredients. Not only the ability to vote, which they did not grant, but the immediacy and the intimacy of the representation. If this were not important, we could have our democracy be a system in which the vice president is the one we elect to make all of our law. And we could be calling ourselves a democracy, but you know that's not how it works. Your heart not only tells you, but your brain tells you. The smallness of the districts is fundamentally important because you know the people you send to Congress. George Washington said, this matters a lot to me. This change should be made. And he sits back down. And in part because he was so influential, the change is approved unanimously. Now, how far have we departed from districts of 30,000 people? We have districts of 750,000 people. And this is a problem. This is why our democracy is failing. This is why you don't even believe it is a democracy. But if you care anything about reversing the influence elites have upon your ability to pay for a house, pay for your food, pay for eggs, it should be a check upon the Senate. They would act fundamentally different than the Senate. The Senate is obviously a check back upon them, but at least we would have that voice. The advantage of smaller districts is that you'd be able to contact your actual representative instead of needing someone to play interference. Normally it's a personal house aide. On average, each congressional representative has 12 of them. It's a role that was invented in 1892 to handle increasing district size because we weren't quite keeping up. They were literally invented 100 years after we became a country. It's like, contacting customer service. You want someone to respond to your calls, your pleas. You want to be able to follow up. You want to be able to get in contact with them quickly. You want them to be able to follow up. You want to be able to glare at their spouse if they do something wrong at the local high school basketball game or something. It's important that our districts be small. But right now, we have over 7,000 personal house aides that could just be representatives who cannot put their name to anything they write, who are answering to this mini tyrant of a boss, who should just be representing people. If these people could represent small districts, we'd have very interesting coalitions. Rural people all around the country could make focused legislation. City people all around the country could make focused legislation. There could be actual debate. We would have interesting coalitions, and we'd have more third parties because we wouldn't need this filter of the national political parties to understand where our representative lands on an ideological spectrum. Because again, we know somebody that knows them. Our democracy was supposed to work this way. You might have some fiscal concerns. How do we pay all these new representatives? Well, we have so many personal house aides, and they are paid. They have pre-existing office space. We can split the difference, have districts of 50,000 people, and we would need no new payroll. We would need no new office space. These people are already there. They're young, they're motivated, they could easily go back to their home districts and actually run. They would probably go right back to Congress, and this time they could put their name on the stuff they do, and you could get to know them and help them. For Democrats, there were three things that you thought we needed constitutional amendments to fix: gerrymandering, the Electoral College, and outside money in politics. This largely fixes all three with a simple majority vote in Congress. Because one, the Electoral College is calculated based on the number of representatives. So this smooths out the choppiness of the Electoral College. Two, for gerrymandering, it is nearly impossible with the precedents we have left to gerrymander that many districts. It is nearly impossible. This largely fixes a bunch of problems we have with gerrymandering. And three, outside money in politics. When they can't swift vote you, when you can run on your own dime, this reduces the effectiveness of outside money into politics. This reduces the effectiveness of foreign influence campaigns into your politics. And all it requires is a simple law. No constitutional amendment. We don't need to jump through those hoops. Just a law. It also lowers the barrier to entry into national politics, not only for pocketbook reasons, but once you get there, you don't have to hire a set of 12 personal house aides and poach off of representatives that are leaving Congress. It's you. And with your wonderful smartphone, a technology that did not exist when Congress originally made the choice to cap the size of the House, you can set reminders, talk on Zoom, you can set pins for where you should meet, you can have Discord groups, you can speak in person, chat, all sorts of things. We have this miraculous technology. We can make it work. Within this population of 10,000, 7,000, there will be subject matter experts. We could have shared documents. We could draft together. This would actually work. If we have citizen initiative systems already around the country, we can make democracy work with a much smaller number of people who are actually engaged full-time with the subject matter. This could work. This will work, and it might head off this encroaching technocratic feudalism imagined by Curtis Yarvin and a whole bunch of tech bro billionaires. That's like a cross between Neil Stephenson's 1992 science fiction book Snow Crash and a company town mixed with like the British East India Company, except this is like the American version of it. But they're so obsessed with this future, they'll avoid all the problems that the British East India Company ran into because they'll use AI to administer it. As the currency, they'll use crypto. To avoid self-rule, they'll use AI, and they'll protect themselves against a wealth tax. If you're not Luigi, this is probably what you should do. Repealing Section 22 of the 1929 Permanent Apportionment Act is the lowest of the lowest hanging fruit when it comes to fighting against an oligarchy. There is a reason, however, why it hasn't been plucked, and that is our current representatives. They have won their elections already through blood, sweat, and tears. Their lifestyle is funded through political donations from 750,000 people. They will resist this to the ends of the earth. In which case, I think it's important to either play dirty and get the House aides involved, write law that they will get their foot in the door to running for these new districts. If they do, they might actually get some political power. But if that fails, I think it has to be dealt with through an oath. And call it an oath against oligarchy. One, I will not vote for any spouse or child of any high-level official, executive, senator, or representative. And two, I will not vote for anyone who does not say they will support or put in writing that they will support a law expanding the House of Representatives. And it needs to enter the public conversation. But before I go, I wanted to leave you with something to cogitate upon, to think about how fundamental our district size is to our republic, our constitutional democracy, however you want to call it. The framers thought this very important. So, our order of amendments doesn't seem to make sense until you actually look at them in their original form as articles. So, Article the first was small districts. It missed by one state. In fact, it's the only one of the 12 articles first submitted to the states to become our Bill of Rights that hasn't been ratified. Small districts. This is the fundamental building block of our democracy. And they said, well, that's how you make your representative responsive to you. Someone asked, what happens if they lose interest in representing you? And they said, well, how would that happen? They said, well, they would pay themselves so much money so that they could just retire. They could just go off to some state and live in the lap of luxury because they paid themselves so much money. So they have the Congressional Pay Amendment. This is now our 26th Amendment, spotted by a very enterprising graduate student who brought it over the finish line. Then someone said, wait, so they can't pay themselves immediately and they're small districts. What if they're still not listening to us? And the president says, well, how would that happen? He says, well, someone would break the chain of democratic communication. So we need to protect that. There are 5 links to actually reaching your representative with your concerns. 1, you start off with a thought, like a moral compulsion. That's religion. Then you say it out loud to your friends or to other people. That's speech. Then you put it in the press. You spread the word far and wide. That's press. Then a whole bunch of people read that, they come together and they start to organize and make something formal. That's assembly. And then petition. You give that proposition to your representative. This protects our ability to contact your representative and tell them what you want to happen. So then someone says, well, what if all that fails? What if your representative still doesn't represent you? Well, then you keep and bear arms. Bear arms against as the final resort. That's our Second Amendment now. And they said, so what if Congress kind of headed that off, as we saw the British try to do to us, and put soldiers in our homes, not only to save money, but to prevent us from bearing arms, from keeping arms? He said, well, no quartering. That was Article the 5th, but it's now our Third Amendment. No quartering soldiers. Now it keeps going, but you can tell that it was a conversation. The framers had a conversation about this, and it all stemmed from small districts. This is the only one that is not part of our Constitution, and our Constitution fails because it's not there. It fails because it's not there. Expand the House of Representatives. Make democracy immediate again.